don't know my name, I don't know what to answer to. God could be calling you. And you think he's calling somebody else. Because you don't know your name. Oh, God, have mercy here. You may be called a junkie or that HO thing or whatever folk may be calling you, but that's not who you are. That might be your behavior, but that's not your name. Whatever I'm in, I'm Jehovah's. Whatever I'm in, I'm a child of Abraham. Satan may have me spiritually been over for 18 years, but that's not who I am. I'm still a child of Abraham. A whole lot of our problem is it may be that we don't know who we are, and so we're living down to who we think we are as opposed to living up to who we really are. And that's what happens to church folk. They identify more with the world system than they identify with God. And so they are called by names that the world puts on them, as opposed to being called by the name of God. I promise you that everybody that was in Egypt after 400 years had an Egyptian name. I know I'm right about it because when Joseph went down there in bondage, the first thing Pharaoh did was change his name. His name began to represent Ra, or the sun god. No longer was he Joseph. Are you praying with me here? So look at what God says to Moses in verse 14. He said, Moses, I am that I am. And thus shall you say to the children of Israel, I am sent you unto me. This is awesome. He said, tell him I am. This answers Moses' question of verse 13. When I come to the children of Israel, and they say unto me, and say unto them, the God of your fathers sent me, and they ask me, what is your name, his name? What shall I say? God answered that question. Tell them, I am that I am. Tell them, I am sent you. Lord have mercy. Verse 14 is the answer to the question of verse 13. But more than that, because one can't truly worship God without first knowing who God is. And who God is tied up in his name. And so I believe the question that Moses asked in verse 13 was actually implanted in his spirit by God himself. Because the other thing is that one will not be an effective leader for God without first knowing who God is. You got to know whose voice you hear. You got to know, if you can get this in your spirit, the substance behind the sound. Not just the sound of God's voice, but you got to know the substance behind the sound. You got to know who is speaking to you. And the power behind the one who's calling your name. One more thing I see here, and that is that God does not prepare folk to worship him after he brings them out, but he prepares them to worship him while they are in bondage. You pray with me here. I got some Bible. The prodigal son did not get ready to worship God after he got out the pig pen, but it was in the pig pen he came to himself. That's where he had his encounter with God and decided to go home. Is there anybody in here that can attest that you met God while you were in your pig pen? I'm not talking about after you got out your mess, but while you were in your pig pen. Not when you got up, but while you were down. Folk tickle me. Well, you know I'm not ready to come yet. Ain't nobody ever going to be ready. You not ready when God calls you. You just got to come out because God's ready to bring you out. Y'all ain't praying here. I'm ready to smoke more dope, but I got to put it down and come out because God is ready to bring me out. God told Moses, I am who I am. While the folk were messed up, go down and tell them I am who I am. Now, this name points to the self-existence and the eternality, that's right, of God. It denotes the one who is, was, is, and always will be. But it means more than just I am or that I am. Can I tell you what it really means? It means I am who I will be. God says I am whoever I want to be. When I want to be it. I remember Paul saying, I make myself all things to all people that I might win some. Now, if Paul got that from God, Paul says, I'm just imitating I am, who makes himself whatever he needs to be, to win who he needs to win. God says, I am whatever you need. Y'all ain't understanding here. If I'm called by his name, then I look into God's name to see a reflection of who I am. So if he is a Jehovah Jireh, then I am the provided for. Y'all ain't praying here. If he is Jehovah Rapha, the Lord that heals, I look into God's name and say, I am the healed. If he is Jehovah Nissi, which means a banner over me, then I look into that name and say, I am the covered. Can I get a witness here? If I understand that God's name is El Shaddai, he's got all power, then I am the one empowered by God. I come to tell you something here. When God gets ready to bring a people out, he tells that people just who they are before he brings them out. Can I get a witness here? I'm not done yet, but I see something here. Way over in the New Testament, when God was talking to Joseph, he said, this boy in Mary's belly, his name shall be Jesus, because he shall save his people from their sins. When I look at that name and see it covers my life, I can tell a darn well I still got some problems, but I'm saved because his name is Jesus. Can I get a witness here? When God gets ready to bring a people out, he'll tell somebody what your burden is and send them down to let you know that God has not forgotten you. When God gets ready to bring you out, to bring you up to worship, he'll tell you the name that you ought to worship. His name is Yahweh. Some call him Jehovah. His name, help me, is above every name. That at that name, every knee got to bow, every tongue must confess that he's Lord, to the glory of God. At the name